Thank you. I appreciate that, Marka, and thank you to Michael for setting us up there. Let me see. Let me share my screen here. Um, sec- right. Yeah. So specifically, we did a study titled "Online Latino Latinx Vernacular Discourse." And so we're looking at the discourse of a local nonprofit coalition of humane immigrant rights, Los Angeles, known to us as Chirla. And yeah, the politics of the Southwest border have been really are to me something that hits home because I come from a family of Mexican migrants. I have close family that are still undocumented to this day. And so, and it continues to be a contentious topic, and it's not by accident. Undocumented people can't vote, and so they're the easiest targets of politicians. And so, I don't think it's an accident that they're targeted, right? Because politicians tend to target those that are easiest to scapegoat, and that's folks that can't vote, right? Folks that have to vote by proxy through other folks, and it has a deep impact on those living in on these borderlands. And so, and what's interesting about specifically the Southwest border is that the discourses, the dominant discourses, make people believe that um, the people living on these lands are not native, right, or foreigners, when in fact uh, it was it was indigenous land, Mexican land, Spanish land. It's changed national titles uh, over time quite a bit, and so people that have been migrating in these lands have been migrating for these lands for hundreds of years, and so that's something about the framing of the dominant discourse of these communities, right, and something to understand. But specifically, looking at Shira's um, narratives and discourses and how they construct home and resistance and construct identity online. And so, chila.org, if you'd like to take a look at it for yourself, they have an Instagram page there, and I just wanted to shout them out. I've worked with them. They do a lot of great work. Have been leading a lot of great work in California. Help lead what is it? Rights for migrant workers in the fields because they were excluded from the National Labor Act in the United States. And so, while a lot of laborers had rights in the United States, migrants were excluded from that law. But here in California, and they're leading a movement across the United States where folks are getting some of those rights back at the state level. But specifically looking at online vernacular discourses. And so here, what you see here is an image of an actual post, right? Post and the text there. Oh, sorry. And so this is a post, something that they posted on Instagram, um, and the primary goal of our chapter, right, is to privilege the perspectives of migrant communities, center their discourses, and their organization. It's an organization that's led by migrants and is engaged in the struggle for migrants' rights since 1986. And so, for a few decades now, Chila has been very active in uh, creating rights for migrant folks, and now have are doing some of that work, doing a lot of that work online. Um, and so spaces like Instagram or what we're arguing are a part of an online vernacular where discursive performances are illuminated, right? So these dialectical tensions. Lacan calls it subaltern, right? Contrast these particular perspectives against dominant institutions. And so we're uncovering the tensions by analyzing. We analyzed hundreds of posts. Let's see, about 132 of their posts and captions and representative themes between 2018 and 2019. We were looking at a couple campaigns of uh, hashtag home is here, hashtag keep families together. So we're looking at those campaigns, and we're looking at things like um, language that they were using, the use of emojis, their use of hashtags, uh, um, And so yeah, so and with and with any of these social forms of social media, they all have their own syntax, right? And so with Instagram, there's a limit of 2,200 characters, 30 hashtags, and part of what we're arguing is that this on it is through these posts we can reveal what is becoming an online vernacular, a framing of meaning of the images, because the images captions are a direct indicator of intended meaning. And so and we recognize at the same time that Instagram is visually dominant, right? And acknowledge that other scholars have been primarily studied Instagram through a visual lens, but we focus on the analysis on both the textual and the visual, um, to enhance the overall meaning of an understanding of vernaculars, right? What vernaculars is, and I'll go a little deeper into vernaculars. Our focus centers on both of these components, and without we argue that without the accompanying text, Chila's posts and images to Instagram would be left without some context, right? Important context, and so it's revealing of the online vernacular. Um, and so we look at this through a lens of scholarship, uh, theory, Latino, Latinx vernacular discourses, and part of what we're arguing is that Latino vernacular discourses is a understanding of struggle, how Latino communities produce, engage, and act and perform culture, perform identity, and community, and conform community. And so it illuminates power relations between communities by exploring, these textual fragments of culture. And so it's the revealing of these textual fragments of culture. So we can look at this post by Sheila, and part of how we're examining, right, is this idea of how Sheila is resisting, how they're constructing community, and we could see some of that through this post, right? While it's informative, it is informative. This post, right? It's intended to be informative, but how it reaches the community is important, right? Like the use of the police siren, this idea of policing the police, and as we move through the text, the use of language, and in particular, um, making sure that it's in both English and Spanish, um, for it to reach the intended audiences. And that's very surface level. I just wanted to start pointing to some of how this vernacular discourse is being constructed online. But scholars Ono and Sloop argue that vernacular discourses, there's two primary characteristics of online vernacular discourses, and that's cultural syncretism, what they describe as cultural syncretism, and pastiche. And cultural syncretism, right, is the idea that is a process of cultural expression that simultaneously affirms cultural understandings and protests dominant narratives, ideologies, right? And so I purposely, these are also posts that they used on Instagram during these campaigns. One of them is a post that is celebrating Walter Mercado. Walter Mercado is a um, um, a well-known celebrity, astrologer, entertainer, that many people hold dear in their hearts, and including folks in my family and myself. And another one is this artwork that a local Latino artist created. And part of why saying that this is a form of cultural syncretism, right? Of this process that is affirming and understanding of the community, but also protesting these dominant narratives, right? We can look at someone like Walter Mercado, who may not be celebrated in many other communities in the same way that celebrated in Latino community. But part of what I'm pointing to is that with syncretism is that there's the use of Instagram itself as a form of syncretism, right? The use of the medium, because the medium is a part of a larger dominant structure. But why it's being used and how it's being used, I think, is some of the things to distinguish. and the phrasing of like hashtags. Because even we argue that the use of hashtags itself is a form of cultural syncretism, because of its function, right? Its function, its technical function, and that should be distinguished between its technical function and its actual phrasing that are used for a hashtag. And so, yeah, we argue here that online cultural syncretism, it's something a little bit difficult to distinguish, but this is cultural syncretic in a couple ways. Like for example, this post here, right? Uh, um, the use of Instagram, again, as we mentioned, and specifically the hashtag functions. And second is the deployment of bilingualism, right? That using this technology that's part of a dominant structure, using the mechanisms of it, but as well as the language that's being applied here, right? And so this is a post of what is Claudio Patricio Gomez Gonzalez, presente hoy, mañana y siempre, hashtag keep families together. Someone who separated from their children. And again, what we're saying is that it's culturally syncretic, because it's while it is using this dominant structure, it's resisting of dominant narratives of migrant communities. And something that's been a part of U.S. narratives, right, is that the family unit is something that's most important, yet is revealing of how U.S. institutions are actively destroying that, right, taking that away from people, because they're migrants, and folks have previously said it, being described as um, a menace or a threat, right, allows government institutions to take that on. But simultaneously, I don't want to focus on that. Like, want to focus on the voice of the migrant communities and how they're constructing home for other folks that may be seeing this, right? Other migrants that may be seeing this and are part of this. Um, and so as we move forward to talk about pastiche, this idea of pastiche, um, it's pastiche is one almost call a recombination and reconstitution of dominant and marginalized ideologies. It's a practice that is ever changing, but also constant concern. There's a constant concern for local conditions and social problems. And so the pastiche, the piecing together of migrant lives, and I point to specifically this post, that says, "We're just going to leave this here. Shout out to all amazing undocumented parents. Students have been able to navigate their way through higher education. We see you." As celebrating, excuse me, sorry, I've been had this cough for like a month now and just won't go away. Um, celebrating how people are crafting their lives together despite not having access to education. And that's still the case in many states, several states, not say many, several states in the United States, where in places like Arizona, it's literally illegal to use what is it, to be undocumented and use public resources there, and where they've created police out of local educators, right, where local educators are required to um, notify authorities if they believe that someone is undocumented. um, and uh, the where we get to that idea, where I get to this idea of recombination and constitution in the chapters, we want to keep pointing to how dominant, how while it may be seen as assimilation, right, that like graduating from school, getting citizenship may be seen as assimilation. Um, reaching those reaching that status has to be seen in a way that is more nuanced than Antonio Gramsci's work of like hegemony, right? That like power operates differently in these cases. And there's a scholar that we point to, Jose Esteban Munoz, who has this theory about now I'm blanking on the theory. Um, disidentifications, the theory of disidentifications, where people in marginalized communities at times have to try to find ways to fit in to get safety. And in particular, Esteban Munoz was talking about disidentifications in terms of being trans, that sometimes people who are trans perform straightness in order to survive. And I think that's something, and that notion of how power operates and how power forces people to perform in a certain way in order to achieve safety, I think is important. And so that's something we want to get to with Pastiche. And let me wrap up here soon.
Sorry,
so we looked at the different campaigns of like
to interrupt
Home
you,
is Here.
You have 3 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that, Monica. And so we look at the campaigns of Home is Here and how the use of the hashtag Home is Here to resist some of the dominant narratives of what is home for a citizen and why, and to resist undocumented folks from believing some of those dominant narratives. Because that's the thing about these narratives, is that some people they're ideas, right? And anybody can adopt these ideas, including undocumented folks themselves, right? And have people feel a certain way about themselves. And so here they're celebrating the idea of what is home, and resisting and creating home, not just in the United States, but having a online home. Um, and we argue also the use of emojis as a form of pastiche of a new way of looking at language and how language is used in these online spaces. We point to this post specifically because of the use of emojis like the siren, the explosion, the brown fist, and how they function, right, for creating community, for creating resistance. In conclusion, analyzing migrant discourses from localized perspectives allows scholars to pivot away from research practices devalue migrant communities and to practice celebrate and uplift migrant voices, but also allowing those voices to have, as we mentioned before, that dignity, right? That like reducing migrants to one identity of their lives, it's definitely a part of it. And I've lived that life with my family, but there's more to it than that. And Tree uses Instagram of migrants to frame the struggle of migrants and to reflect the tension of affirming their status while inspiring active resistance toward these dominant structures. So that's my presentation today. Thank you all for